All right, listeners, welcome back to the Cranbourne East Secondary Podcast. Once again, we've got myself, Mr. L. We also have
Myself, Mr. Young, and our special guest.
We have a special guest today, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Mr. Cousins.
All right, cool. We have Mr. Cousins with us today. So, Mr. Cousins, if there's any students who unfortunately haven't had the joy of having you as the teacher, what do you teach around the school? What do you teach?
Well, first, I just want to start by saying, look, I'm bitterly disappointed that it's taken you so long to get me on your award-winning show. That's the starting point. I think it's really crucial that, you've got to have good content, and having good people on is really important. So it's disappointing that you didn't come to me in the first few shows, but that's okay. You got a good listener base, and now you've got the real talent on. So that's important. But,
we wanted more listeners first. We just hit 200. We needed you for the big games, man. We can't have you for the small fry.
Absolutely. Don't bring me in at the start. Don't bring me in for the warm up. I agree. Now, look, I am Melbourne PE teacher at Cranbourne East. I'm currently the Year 11 assistant leader, and recently was the head of sport at the school as well. And I've done a whole range of different roles across the last 5 years of being at the school. But my main role now is, I've got Year 9 Sports Pathway, Health and Human Development at Year 11, Year 9 PE, Year 10 Intro to VCPE. So I've got a few different things.
Yeah, and the thing about Mr. Cousins is that a lot of people don't notice, but he actually has a science background as well. So don't let the pretty looks and the hunky jock type of looks fool you. But trust me, he's also got a scientific background as well in biology. So that's
I'm a biology teacher as well, not just PE. So
So that's why I thought I'd have us on today, because there's a few topics I did want to talk about, because I was thinking about it. You know what? How do I bring together a conversation between the three of us when, Mr. Young, he does do some sports, but he's more into weightlifting, that type of sports. I'm more into the soccer, that type of sport, American football. And Mr. Cousins, as you know, he's into quite a lot of sports. So I was like, okay, without me and Mr. Young's limited sports knowledge, how can I still go and talk to Mr. Cousins over half an hour about something that we could talk about? So I did actually have an interesting concept that I wanted us to think about, and then we can probably discuss this a bit. Okay. So Mr. Young, you teach STEM, don't you?
I do. I have the pleasure of it.
And as you know, technology has been changing quite a bit over time, right? So one of the key questions that I was thinking about was, I actually thought back of a conversation I had with a good friend of mine who used to work for Hawkeye. So for those of you that don't know the Hawkeye company, they started off by helping out at tennis tournaments, where whenever a player wanted to challenge a shot, they would use all these high-tech cameras to take a look at the trajectory of the ball and so on. So, it seemed pretty okay back then, not too bad. But then it started getting really controversial when they started adding it into other sports. So in particular, I remember when VAR first got introduced into soccer, it was a huge deal. So one of my mates, he worked for Hawkeye. He was talking about the positives behind it. It's like, the game becomes way more accurate. People would want the true result to be shown. But then again, I had another mate who thought that VAR is actually killing the true culture of sport. Now, let me explain why. And he gave it a really good example. And I want to hear both of your inputs on what your thoughts are on this. So my friend, who's a huge soccer fan, talked about a very famous Maradona incident in the past called the Hand of God. Yes, the famous Hand of God. So there was an Argentinian game. And what happened was that a very famous soccer player by name of Maradona, he jumped up for a header, but then the ball went in, and I think eventually led them to win the final, or that was the final. I forgot which one it was. But then when people actually looked at the video footage after the game, they realized he didn't actually use his head. He actually illegally used his hand to actually smack the ball into the goal. And so my friend was saying, but the culture of soccer, imagine in history, if that didn't happen. Think about all the crazy stories that we would have missed. And, the culture of sport shouldn't be so rigid. It should be, sometimes some things can be allowed to be like, let's not refer to video footage. Let's just leave it to the opinion of the ref. So with that in mind, I would like to pose to Mr. Cousins first and then Mr. Young next. What are your thoughts on having technology being used as a way as like a second referee or a third referee? What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, it is controversial. I sit on, depending upon the day, depending upon the event, depends upon how I feel most about it. So absolutely, I'm a massive believer in the rules, and rules are fairly black and white. If you're offside, you're offside, and if it's in, it's in. If it's out, it's out. So technology allows us to obviously get those correct calls. I think what the biggest frustration with technology is that there's still often, and VAR is the big concern. In Hawkeye, you don't seem to have as many controversial decisions as what you do with VAR, because VAR still has a level of grey. There's still a grey area involved. There's still a level of somebody has to make a decision. Was it offside? Was it not offside? Which part of the foot, which part of the leg, which part of the body are we looking at, etc. So, and obviously if you look at the AFL with the camera angles and there's still a human element to it. So I think sports like tennis and even cricket to a certain extent, where the decision is made purely by Hawkeye and that's it, then I think those sports have done technology perfectly well. And then those sports that still have the variables that are associated with the human error, whether it be soccer with VAR, AFL with the goal line technology, I think that still makes the frustration within the fans. And I think the other part is it takes way too long. So
true.
I think if the flow of the game continued and the decision was made quickly, I think then fans would be more excited. So I sit sort of a little bit of both. I like that the rules are followed, but I also dislike the flow of the sport being stopped.
True. How about you, Mr. Young? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, okay, so this is how into sports I am. So I'll go to I'll watch sports at times. I'll watch the footy if I'm at the MCG. And from being at the MCG, it feels like part of the enjoyment is people yelling at the referee for their call. So it's why let people lose part of their enjoyment if it's part of it's kind of fighting for your own team.
Yeah.
But then it becomes the whole, as Mr. Cousins was saying, if the flow kind of stops from you having to look at every single goal that happens that is controversial, does that actually add to any enjoyment to that game? But then it also becomes, I'm not too sure how it works, but then you also have to consider that, yes, we can use AI to predict how that particular scenario would have gone. But was that AI able to predict what every single variable that would have occurred to happen? So what are the chances that something would have happened in that scenario that the AI was not able to predict? So I think it's kind of it's good as I need to know exactly which point belongs to who type of scenario, but then for the whole enjoyment aspect of sports, which I think is the main reason we watch sports, probably just hinders it a bit.
I think also too, the biggest frustration as well is that it's not consistent. So we use technology for score reviews, but we don't go back and use technology for any other aspect of the game. So when a referee makes a decision or an umpire makes a decision that's incorrect in the middle of the ground, it's just play on and everyone just continues to play, no worries. Whereas all of a sudden we're happy to use the technology for the goal line review or the whatever the scoring review is. So, I feel like you sort of sit in a bit of both. It's sort of the technology is valuable, but is it consistent? Is it fair? I don't think there's ever going to be an answer that's perfectly, unless we have robots making decisions.
Because that's the thing. I think that you've actually touched onto the next part that I was going to talk about is that, we use technology so often for goal scoring type of challenges, but can you imagine a world in soccer where if every single foul, for example, people had a tennis system, imagine they could challenge it. Do you think that would result in less people doing, soccer is memed all over the time. Someone taps you on the shin and they hold their face, they're rolling on the floor. Whereas you see like women's soccer, they have like no problems, right? They're like, their face is bleeding, they're playing on. But the men's soccer, it's just so important for them to try and get that free kick, you know? So do you think maybe it could actually help the game a bit, potentially, Mr. Cousins?
Potentially. I know rugby league at the moment, they've got a captain's call sort of situation where I think they get one decision a half where they get to challenge the referee. And I think, and the referee will go to the video review to make a decision on that call, whether or not they thought the call was incorrect or they missed the call. So yeah, I could probably see it happening in a game. And I do agree it might lead to the opportunity for people to not be as extravagant, especially in soccer, when it comes to their desire to receive a free kick, etc. But it's I guess that's what we all talk about, isn't it? It's like, oh, that free kick shouldn't have happened, or how about that player that fell over? So I guess it gives us a talking point, I suppose, as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it's part of the enjoyment of watching sports, like
I think
kind
so.
of just arguing.
Yes. Definitely. I agree.
There's no right or wrong answer. And sometimes it's the excitement of, especially if you follow the team where the player's got the free kick that they shouldn't have got and it's impacted the game. You know, it's part of that enjoyment as well. Oh, well, bad luck, it was there. And just sort of,
Yeah. I've actually watched a YouTube video randomly at one point. It just came up on my screen as it suggested. It was the evolution of the game soccer, or like football, right? And when soccer first started, some interesting rules was that there was actually no referee. So of course there was no offside back then. There was no referee. It was actually both team captains that had an honesty system that where they would actually ref the game themselves. So there was no referee, both team captains, and the games were way longer. And I think it was also like there was no crossbar. The goals were way wider. The team had way more people. You could have like 5 versus 80. There was like no rules about how many people can be on a pitch. So it's like the evolution of the game is really interesting. So I think if for those people who want to know a bit more about sports histories, one of those things you can look up and see how games have evolved over time. So Mr. Cousins, do you have any games that you particularly want to suggest people look into the history of?
To your point, I think though, before that question is, I think when it comes to careers, everyone gets stuck, you know, there's so many opportunities, especially with people that love, say, science or maths, but they also love sport, but they don't see the connection between the two. And so, like, I was reading an article the other day of there's a physicist in America. She went to university, she was doing physics, and she then wanted to be involved in Major League Baseball. She saw an opportunity to start to have an influence on teaching people about the different spin from the technical perspective. I know that's not my strength, but the spin on the ball and all of those things. She ultimately got a job at a minor league club and she started to have influence. She now works at the Oakland A's, which are one of the Major League Baseball teams, and she's part of the team that works with the pitchers. And she's passionate about physics. That's what she loves, but she also likes baseball, and she's found herself a job in that. And so I think for many of our students, especially who might like sport, but they also might like science, and they think that there might not be jobs in sport. Sport doesn't just have to be playing the sport or coaching the sport. There's so many other elements, you know, maths or science, etc. And I think that's really important that as students grow up, that they really, if they're passionate about it, there's jobs in sport that merge two worlds for sure. But yeah, as for looking at the history of sports, there's some crazy sports out there. I love everyone to have a look at. Speaking of which, the Paralympics are on at the moment. There's a game. I can't think of what it's called at the moment, but it's they roll a ball with a bell in it, and they lie on the court. I can't remember what it's called. Really? Okay. And they score through a goal behind the people that are lying on the court. It's quite incredible how they can hear the bell and then they can dive to stop the ball from going in the goal.
Is it because it's for visually impaired people? Is that why?
Correct.
I think so. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
So I like that one. That's good.
Yeah. How about you, Mr. Young? Any particular sports you want to, if you wanted to know the history about it, you want to find out a bit more, what would you say?
Kind of wouldn't mind learning about ice hockey, because like I've played field hockey, and field hockey kind of makes sense to me. But then the whole like idea that someone's like, I don't know if it was ice hockey then field hockey or field hockey then ice hockey. True. But the whole idea that someone decided that hey, let's take one of the like really dangerous, rough sports that is also like hurts like a lot and put it on ice.
Yeah, what a great combination, right?
Yeah.
Incredible coordination these people have to have.
Yeah. Well, I can barely ice skate for my life.
So speaking of like different sports that, with the one that you just recommended about the Paralympics, Mr. Cousins, that actually got me thinking about, the next Olympics coming up. So the next Olympics, they are introducing, I think every Olympics, the host nation gets to like suggest like sports. So Paris is adding breakdancing as a new sport, right? So I was thinking like, at what point does something be considered like a sport? Like, for example, people have been arguing for ages about eSports. And, I'm a huge gamer myself. And the idea of eSports even being in the Olympics, it's always been in conversation. So, Mr. Cousins, what are your thoughts on non-traditional sports being considered as sports? Like, do you think that we should make it more clear cut that, okay, you know what, sports needs to be this, this, and this in order for it to be considered? Or do you think you're like, you know what, as long as there's a competitive nature, there's training, it's fine? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as we grow, we're a lot younger than the general population age. I think we are a little bit more, we're less worried about the conformities of tradition, and I think we're happy to change over time. I think if there's a competitive element, look, most people would consider sport to be balls and running around and scoring and etc. But why can't there be other? If I think about breakdancing, well, is it any different from synchronized swimming? Is there any different from the gymnastics routines where they have to run around and use the ribbon and the artistic gymnastics? Like, is it any different from any of that? It requires training. It requires competition. If there's an element of scoring involved, sure. Why not? I think if I really enjoyed the rock climbing in the Olympics that we just had.
Loved it.
And I just thought it was amazing to see them climbing up the wall and get into ridiculous positions to try to get higher. And why not? I like. So long as it doesn't take away from the traditional sports like the athletics and swimming and stuff like that. Why not? Add it in. Add as many in as you can. More gold medals, the better, I reckon.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Mr. Young?
I actually think I agree. I don't think I can put it in another, like a better way that Mr. Cousins has already done. With eSports, that's kind of like, well, you consider sports kind of more of a competition. Some people say it's physical, but there are physical aspects to esports, even though it's not too obvious. Breakdancing, that is still physical.
Oh, very.
And yeah, like I can't breakdance at all. Like that would be just embarrassing. Yeah. But yeah, like I don't see a reason why it shouldn't be considered a sports that would be in the Olympics. I think it's great that we actually branch out with more sports in the Olympics, because it can get, well, like as we develop as a society, I guess, not to get too like philosophical or whatever, but basically everyone develops like an interest in something else. And sometimes the sports that we have now aren't what we are currently, like what some people might be interested in. So the opportunity to celebrate everything that everyone is interested in is a fun idea. So yeah, I think it's a good move.
Okay. What if I play devil's advocate then? And let's go to an extreme. All right. So if we said that as long as it's competitive, people can train for it, there needs to be some sort of ranking system. So let's say MasterChef, for whatever reason, suddenly becomes like an Olympic sport where, within time limit, you need to prepare a particular dish or something and cook it. And then there still is a ranking system where there is judges, same thing. Or maybe there will be cameras to rank you on your technicality of it as you make it as well and combined. And then there's final scores. Could that still be considered, for example, an Olympic sport? I'll start with you first, Mr. Young, and now I'll go to Mr. Cousins next, because I know, Mr. Young, you like cooking and baking. So what are your thoughts?
I do like cooking, but this is actually like a hard one, because it's like, well, it is physical. It is physical.
Definitely, 100%. Or Mr. Cousins,
think-
if you had any thoughts as well, yeah.
I'm currently looking at what the actual definition of sport is. and then,
Okay. Yep. Let's go from there. Yeah.
So the definition of sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So I suppose technically, yes, MasterChef could be a sport. Would it be? It's probably not traditional, but who's to say that it can't be? Look, I think there's a line that will eventually be drawn in some of these sports, but yeah, look, based on the definition of sport, if it's an active physical exertion and skill, absolutely, and you can be individual or in a team. Yeah.
Mixed teams.
It's definitely one of those out there ones.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the biggest challenge is that the physical exertion part is probably the bit that most people
would debate about.
Would debate. So you look at eSports is not physically demanding as in from a physical standpoint, but it is mentally challenging and emotionally challenging as well. So yeah, I don't know. I think one day we'll see, maybe not that extreme, but we'll definitely see some random sports, I think, that'll be involved.
Yeah, definitely. So if you both had a vote and you could say anything in the world that would be an Olympic sport for the Brisbane Olympics, what would you vote for? So I will chuck in mine first. For myself, if I was to think that, all right, at the Brisbane Olympics, I can add any sport I wanted, I think I would want to add MMA, UFC. I think we already have boxing already. So, why don't we spice it up? I love watching the UFC. Why don't we just add it in as well? So that's my thoughts. What are the both of your thoughts on that? Or do you have one yourself that you want to add on?
What about something random like cup stacking or Rubik's Cube challenge?
Speed cubing, yeah.
Imagine that. Just you get all these ridiculously fast hands just spinning, stacking cups or spinning Rubik's Cubes. That could be interesting.
Well, there is a documentary on Netflix at the moment called Speed Cubers. I heard pretty good things about it, but I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. Do you have any friends that Speed Cube or any students that you know of, Mr. Cousins?
I'm sure there's a few. I'm just trying to think of who has the Rubik's Cubes on their desks. They're probably all in Mr. Young's STEM class, I reckon.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably some. Have you got any that can do the Rubik's Cube, Mr. Young?
I have a few that have brought in a Rubik's Cube to class, but I've never seen them actually speed complete one. Mainly because they just either have the cube and then they just leave it there, or they just do the cube underneath the table where I can't see. But I know they're actually like working on the Rubik's Cube. So yeah, I haven't seen them actually like time themselves to work on it.
We've been actually in our Year 10 intro to PE class, we've been practicing juggling as our skill acquisition topic, and we've been doing juggling and we've been learning about how to juggle from the cognitive stage through the autonomous stage. But maybe next year I might throw Rubik's Cubes into the mix and see how they go with that.
Yeah, there's actually
like juggle and solve the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
So what was that?
Get them to juggle and solve the Rubik's Cube as they're doing it.
I've seen that before. They juggle, they throw it up as they're solving it. I've seen that before. You can look that up online. But
yeah, there's that kid that does three of them in a stupid amount of time.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And there's so many, I never realized, I always thought that Rubik's Cubes, there was just like 3x3 and that's it. But there's so many. There's like 12x12, 6x6. There's like just so way crazy. Too many. And when you were talking about juggling, actually, Mr. Cousins, that actually reminds me, when I was driving home from the city one day, you know how sometimes when you stop at a traffic light and then people will offer to, like clean your windows and stuff like that. But instead on Nicholson Street, yeah, there was this guy when the traffic stopped, he stood in front and just started juggling like multiple things. And then when the traffic light's about to go, he just takes a bow and he just moves off and the cars just go. It's just like so random.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Some of the skills that people have are incredible.
Yeah.
And I think as a school, we've got some untapped talent that we probably don't even realize that some people have got skills that we wouldn't even know about.
Totally agree. So, Mr. Young, how about the sport that you would nominate for the Olympics?
Okay. So, this is going to sound really weird, and I'm only saying it because it's weird. But have you seen videos online on YouTube where it's like the Japanese speed gift wrapping?
Oh, yeah, I have seen something like that. Yeah,
It's like they use one sheet of paper and then they only use one sticky tape and they manage to wrap a whole present within like 10 seconds.
that's crazy. Hiring for
Like,
Christmas.
I need to look this up.
Yeah, it's kind of intense. Or like there's been videos of like fastest workers online, and they are crazy.
Yeah.
Is it Mary Kondo, the one that does the houses? Maybe we should just have a Mary Kondo competition with who can have
Mary Kondo is like holding it, and does it spark joy?
Yeah, my clothes are Mary
true.
Kondo folded at the moment, actually.
Are they? You've folded them up and rolled them up and put them in?
Yeah, so it's not that simple, Mr. Cousins. Apparently, every single time you make a fold, you have to thank it for the amount of joy and support that it's giving you. So I don't go to that extreme, but I just crease it out. I'm like, yep, I don't have time for this, but I'll just do as much as I can.
I saw an interesting one. There was one on Facebook, or one of those, one of an ad that popped up, and at the start of every year, a lady, she puts all her clothes on her rack back to front, so that the coat hanger's facing forward.
Oh wow!
And then by the end of the year, any that are still facing, so when she wears that product, she puts it back normal. Smart. So by the end of the year, if it's facing towards her, she hasn't worn it that year, and she chucks it out, gifts it, does whatever.
Never thought about it that way. Yeah,
because we'd all have clothes that are sitting at the bottom of our drawer, I'm sure, that you haven't seen for months.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, then again, at the moment, because it is lockdown, it makes it a little bit harder, because you're like, oh yeah, I would normally wear this outside, but because it's lockdown, I don't get to wear this, or I don't get to go to events as often, for example. So yeah,
I think we all get emotionally connected to clothes, don't we? Oh, those comfortable pair of shorts, or that t-shirt that you can never find a way to throw out, that's got holes in them, and it's ripped apart, and it's like, oh, I just don't want to chuck it out.
Exactly, I totally agree.
What about you, Mr. Young? Have you got some clothes there that you just can't find yourself chucking out?
I've recently chucked out most of my clothes because I had a pretty big weight loss moment. So that made like 80% of the clothes I wore unwearable. So I had to chuck everything out. So it's all like very minimal clothes that I actually do get to keep. But the only piece of clothing that I've decided to keep was my Year 12 blazer.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I still have mine. How about you, Mr. Cousins? You still got your blazer?
Blazer, no, but I've got our... I don't know what happened to my blazer in the end, but I've got my Year 12 jumper with my name on it.
Oh yeah, true. I have that. I don't have a blazer, but I've got my Year 12 jumper with my name on it. Yes, definitely. Yeah, cool. So that brings us time now. I know time flies when we're having fun, but it's already down. We've been in for 27 minutes now. So let's have a quick show suggestion. So let's have Mr. Young suggest a show, unless you haven't thought of one yet. You have? Perfect. Mr. Young, what show would you like to suggest to us today?
Okay, so just following through with the theme that I usually go with, I'm recommending an anime. So I had to double check the name of it just now, but the name is Fena Pirate Princess.
Okay, well, okay.
So like, it sounds really weird, but basically it's this princess who I think knew she was a princess, but ended up being left on her own. She gets found again by a group of like her old attendants, and she is rescued. And then she's deciding to actually solve a mystery that her father has left behind for her. It's basically I won't go into what the mystery is, but basically the meme is people are saying it's like One Piece, but she'll actually find One Piece.
Okay, so it's like pirate treasures and all that stuff as an anime. Okay, cool.
Young, tell me about anime just quickly. I know we only got a couple of minutes, but tell me how. I just can't understand this current fascination with anime. How are people watching? It's Japanese, correct?
Yes.
So watching anime with subtitles on, cartoons, and I'm sure the cartoons are awesome. Is there not cartoons in English that do the exact same thing, or is it what makes anime so much better than everything else?
This is a discussion in the community, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, next time when we're back in our office, Mr. Cousins, you should ask Mr. Kiss this, because Mr. Kiss did a really good spiel about it. But I'll give my thoughts on it, and Mr. Young, you give your thoughts. The themes are quite different. the themes in terms of what is usually allowed to be shown, because a lot of cartoons, you'll notice that because, I mean, this was like, of course, before South Park came along and Family Guy, you know, back in the day, cartoons, if you think about what they were like and what themes they were allowed to touch on, it was just very comical things, right? Whereas anime, a lot of that stuff dealt with like real life issues and matters, which a lot of cartoons now these days are flowing onto that and more darker themes and darker issues for sure. But back then it was very clear cut that this is definitely anime because of its dark tones, dark themes, or very realistic real life comparisons. Whereas on the other side, you would just have, all right, it's a funny show, which is cartoons made for kids.
So
yeah,
people get it.
Yeah.
It's more relatable. Interesting.
Mr. Young?
Some of it's also thought-provoking. So like I was talking about Psychopaths in a previous episode. It's basically where it's an anime where there's a system that judges how likely you are to commit the crime. And then before you even commit the crime, often like punishes you or puts you into rehab. So it's talking about like if you know someone's going to do something, but they haven't done it yet, are you going to immediately judge them, or are you going to give them a chance type of scenario?
So imagine,
like,
imagine comparing that to your Cartoon Network stuff. Yeah.
Very interesting.
And then on the other hand, when you say like, well, there's like, wouldn't you go for something that's more in English? Well, there is English dubs. So like there'll be English voice actors voicing over the same anime, but then it becomes sometimes emotions aren't conveyed as accurately as the original artist had intended to.
Funny you say that. So do you watch it in Japanese with subtitles, or do you watch it with the dub?
So back in back when I was in BC, I was trying to improve my Chinese. So I would listen to it in Japanese, but read it with Chinese subs.
Oh, that's hard.
It was hard. But now
you watch it in Japanese with Chinese subs.
So yeah, I'll be reading.
How did you know? How did you know what was happening?
Oh, I already kind of knew Chinese.
Okay.
I was just like, can I read this in the right amount of time before it like disappears?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but normally I just watch in Japanese with English subtitles. So I'm used to the subtitles now. There's a whole like meme where like someone can look at the screen where things are actually happening and look at the subtitles at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Cousins, we've talked about Money Heist before.
That was my recommendation with regards to the show. So it's a perfect segue because my suggestion for a show is Money Heist.
Yeah.
And it's Money Heist is in Spanish and with English, where you can have English dub over, or you can have obviously the English subtitles. So my girlfriend and I, we've decided that we're going to watch it in English with the English subtitles. So that way we have to read the subtitles and we don't get to see the mouths totally out of sync with the characters, because I know that can be really hard work to do. So Money Heist is my suggestion for those of you that haven't seen it. It's effectively a group that is brought together by one person and they decide to rob a bank, and there's 4 seasons worth of it, and they're about to go into the next season
September,
at the start of September. So if you can binge watch it over the next sort of few weeks, you'll be able to be up to date with the professor who nuts.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, when I watch Money Heist, I watch it in Spanish and read the English subtitles. But I'm learning like Spanish phrases as we go along. You know, it's like tranquilo, and I'm like, oh, tranquil, it's like peaceful. So that tranquilo, it means like quiet, for example. And then, you know, vamos is like fast, you know. So I'm like, oh, but you know, you gotta of course pay attention. You can't treat it like a day where you're just relaxing. You're just like, all right, I'm just gonna listen to the show, but you know, you got to pay attention quite a bit if you're, you know, listening it in another language. So
absolutely. Have you seen Lupin, Mr. L or Mr. Young?
My sister-in-law who lives with me, she turns it on. So there's French going on as well, you know. So I did study a bit of French in high school, but I stopped at year 10. So some of it I still remember a little bit. I'm like, oh yeah, I can kind of guess what they're saying, but then I would need to read it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, Lupin's similar. Lupin's about it. I can recommend that one too. Lupin's about a guy who's a petty thief, and he sort of makes a career out of it. So they're two that I reckon are really good. They're both on Netflix. So go jump onto that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Perfect. And so my one, I do have an anime I would like to recommend. So 2 animes today. All foreign. Yeah, all foreign. Everyone, you got to practice reading your subtitles. Read fast. Yeah, that's good. Practice your reading skills, everyone. But the show that I'm going to recommend is called Eyeshield 21. And this show, Eyeshield 21, actually really got not just myself, but I believe a whole generation of students into American football. So, in America, they have Friday Night Lights, which is like a TV show or movie. I think they had both where, they talk about American football and you get to see some of it. But then for myself growing up, there was an anime called Eyeshield 21 where the premise was there's this guy who always gets bullied, and he's like a small, scrawny type of person. But the thing is, the way that he gets bullied is that the bullies always get him to run errands for them. It's like, yo, get me my canteen lunch or whatever, or else we'll bash you up. And so he runs really fast to get stuff. And through that, he actually gets really good at running. And so what happens is a team scouts him. They're like, this guy's actually going to be really good as a running back. So the running back's position in American football is you get given the ball and you just got to run as fast as you can. So you don't need to catch it. You don't need to do it. So you see his story and where he's like, someone who's so small and scrawny, yet they can still play a role in this big team. And American football, if you look at it, it's so interesting because they have different teams for different things. They have a team that comes on just to attack, switch that team out. The team that comes on just to defend, switch that team out, and a team that comes on just to kick the ball into the goal. So there's so much teamwork. You see people of all different body sizes playing the sport, the larger people, the linesmen blocking the people, protecting the small guy as they catch the ball, as they run. So I learned so much from it. And so even me, I was like, you know what? I'm not large, I'm not bulky, but hey, I'm sure there's something I can play in this sport. And sure enough, I found it. So yeah.
You're the running back.
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't play running back myself. I play a position called tight end, which is like short sprints, but I can also catch short passes as well. So I don't run far enough to catch long passes, and I'm not fast enough to do like super fast sprints. So I do a mixture of both. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So nice. Yeah, American football, that's very interesting. We look into it, and Eyeshield 21 got me into it. They explain it quite well in the anime. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, that comes to the end of our show today. Mr. Cousins, I just want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Al, for having me. Thank you, Mr. Young. I appreciate it.
No problem. Definitely. So listeners, once again, if we are back at school and you see Mr. Cousins around the yard and you've heard this podcast, let him know that you've heard it. You can feel free to talk to him about any of the topics we talked about today as well, whether it's technology,
signature, any of those things.
Autograph. Yep, definitely. Talk to his agent as well if you want to book in a time with him.
Correct.
Yeah. But until then, we hope that you all look after yourselves and you take care, and that we'll all see you hopefully back at school soon, everyone. All right.
Fingers crossed. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.